Welcome everybody to the Let's Get You Chartered presentation from Engineering New Zealand. My name is Andrew Drummond and my colleague Teresa Lockram will be joining me for the second part of this. So Teresa and I are competence assessment advisors at Engineering New Zealand, and we are what I like to call the middle people between applicants such as yourselves and our assessors going through this process. So this presentation is designed to provide guidance on the membership pathway. It's providing guidance on the assessment process and how to gain professional recognition, and also hints and tips for what the assessors are looking for in your portfolio of evidence. So the first step through this process is to go through a credential check with Engineering New Zealand to confirm your eligibility based on your qualifications and any other memberships or registrations that you might hold. In order to get access to the website, to begin this process, you will need to either become a member or an emerging professional of Engineering New Zealand, or you can request online access, which will provide you access to the assessment portal, but without the member benefits. Before beginning this process, we highly recommend either finding a mentor to help you discuss what evidence you should provide and what level of complexity that your work samples show evidence of, or finding someone who has gone through the process before and is on the equivalent membership or registration. We also highly encourage you to begin discussions with your employer around what support they're able to provide you throughout this journey when it comes to things such as member fees and the payment of the assessment itself. Some employers will pay for their staff's application following an internal review. Others may have their staff pay this up front, but at the time of completion might reimburse that applicant. Whatever support is out there for you, we highly recommend starting these conversations so this can help you give yourselves a clear pathway throughout this process. Why should you go through this process to gain professional recognition? Becoming chartered with Engineering New Zealand is something that provides a quality mark of professionalism and shows that you have been assessed by your peers of meeting the standard for professional recognition for your class of chartered membership. So becoming chartered with Engineering New Zealand provides credibility to your organisation, to your clients, and to the general public that you have been competence assessed and that you are bound by a code of ethics. Holding professional recognition with a recognised engineering authority overseas allows you to automatically gain chartered member in your respective class with Engineering New Zealand. This also allows you to go through our Chartered Professional Engineer assessment through a mutual recognition short form assessment to show evidence of only one of our four required engineering groups of competence. Holding professional recognition with Engineering New Zealand allows you to be mutually recognised by overseas authorities, which we have a relationship with, such as ECUK, Engineers Australia, Engineering Council of South Africa, among many more. This is a list of our memberships and registrations which you can apply for through the competence assessment process. We have four classes of membership which are separated into four columns. Most people will look at this slide and not know where they may fit outside of potentially recognising their accord status or their qualification. But the main thing to note about where you fit in our classes is shown in the first row regarding complexity. The entire assessment process is based on your work samples being able to show evidence of complex engineering problems and activities for the professional class, broadly defined for the engineering technologist, well defined for the engineering technician, and complex engineering geological problems or activities for the PNGL class. Knowing the level of complexity of your work samples is often the hardest part of putting together your application, and it is important to discuss with your manager or mentor to establish the level of complexity of your work. To help our assessors, we have a list of complex problems and activity definitions, which are found in our guidance document. However, some examples of these are below. For complex engineering problems, you could use samples that had no obvious solution, which means an original method of analysis is needed. Maybe it couldn't be resolved without in-depth engineering knowledge, or you worked with diverse groups of stakeholders with a wide range of needs, or that the work sample had significant consequences in a range of contexts. While some examples of complex engineering activities are if you worked with diverse resources, for example, people, money, equipment, materials, or technologies, or if you worked with new materials, techniques, or processes. It is vital when discussing your work samples that you make it clear how your evidence is showing complexity, while specifically noting which of these definitions you need to show evidence of. However, the first step in the process is making sure that you're eligible to apply based on your accord status. For the professional class, you are required to hold a Washington Accord qualification, which is a 4-year Bachelor of Engineering from an accredited university within New Zealand. If you do hold Washington Accord accreditation overseas, we'll automatically recognise this. If you do not hold Washington Accord, you'll note that it says equivalent knowledge, and this means that you would need to undertake a knowledge assessment to show that you have bridged the gaps between your qualification and someone who holds a Washington Accord. This could be bridged through on-the-job training, further learning, or a combination of both, and this will be discussed in a later slide in more detail. Please note, for a geologist, you are not required to hold any Accord status, as there is currently no Accord status for the PNSGeol. As discussed previously, each of the 4 classes holds a chartered member class. We also have 3 international registers, INT-PE, INT-ET, and INT-ETN. And for these registers, they are the exact same standard as the chartered member assessment for each class. However, there are 3 additional requirements needed. You need to hold 7 years or more postgrad experience, you need to hold the Accord status qualification, and you have to have 2 years in a role of responsibility. Applicants are able to apply for as many or as little registrations or memberships that they would like to as part of the competence assessment. For example, if you believe that you met the standard and had the evidence to apply for chartered member, CPEng, and INT-PE, you would be able to apply for all 3 of these in the same assessment for the same cost. Chartered member has 4 classes of recognition: professional, technologist, technician, and geologist. These assessments are a general quality mark of professionalism and are only assessed once. If you are able to show evidence of 40 hours of CPD per year, pay your annual fee, and commit to the Code of Ethics, then you are able to maintain your chartered member status with no reassessment required. For chartered member, all classes, you are not required to provide evidence of any New Zealand specific work samples, which means you can use all work samples from overseas if you would like. If you hold professional recognition with a recognised authority overseas, you are automatically able to become a chartered member with no assessment necessary. Our CPEng register is only for the professional class, and this is an assessment that shows a mark of current competence. There is a reassessment required for this registration, at least once every 6 years. There is a requirement to provide evidence of at least 2 New Zealand specific work samples in order to meet the standard for CPEng. You are able to use a combination of overseas and New Zealand samples if preferred, however 2 of these do need to be New Zealand specific. If you hold professional recognition with a recognised authority overseas, you still do need to be assessed for CPEng, however this will only require evidence of 2 work samples that show New Zealand specific good practice, and only need to show evidence of 1 of our 4 groups of competence, which is engineering knowledge. Both of these assessments for the professional class are exactly the same standard, except with the exception of our engineering knowledge group requiring evidence of local knowledge for chartered member and New Zealand specific good practice for CPEng. Both of these postnominals hold credibility and provide a quality mark of professionalism and competence. Some fields or areas of practice require CPEng registration to sign off things like producer statements or to gain access to work sites. However, the majority of fields or areas do not have the requirement of CPEng registration. It is important to discuss with your employer, organisation, mentor, local councils, etc. to decide what is the best membership or registration for you. As of October 1, 2017, we not only changed from IPENS to Engineering New Zealand, but we also introduced a new membership pathway. The membership pathway was changed to provide a clearer and more attractive path to a wider range of disciplines, as in the past, Engineering New Zealand had been pigeonholed as very civil and structural focused. This includes providing a clearer path for academics and providing a proper membership pathway for our engineering geologists, who in the past were only able to be given affiliate status. We had received feedback in the past that there was not enough of a distinction between recent graduates and established professionals from our previous graduate member class. We also heard that people did not like the word graduate being included in the postnominal, as we had people that were 60, 70, 80 plus calling themselves a graduate, which they did not like. We have not only renamed this to be member, but we also introduced a new class called emerging professional. This class is for all recent graduates, and you can either move automatically up to our member class after 5 years of postgraduate experience, or you can go through our graduate development program and move to our member class after 3 years. If you're working for one of our professional development partners, they may have their own approved program which is tailored to their specific organisation, so I would recommend discussing this with your employer. If your organisation does not have a specific program, you can use our Engineering New Zealand program. It is important to note that this assessment process allows you to apply directly for Chartered Member even as an emerging professional if you would like. You'll note that our membership and registration pathways are separated on the slide. This is important to discuss as in order to become a Chartered Member of Engineering New Zealand, you are required to be a member or an emerging professional. However, Chartered Professional Engineer is a parliamentary act, and Engineering New Zealand has been granted the rights to be the registration authority on behalf of this act. Therefore, there is no requirement to be a member of Engineering New Zealand to apply for CPEng. The assessment process is exactly the same for both membership and registration, so if you're a member or an emerging professional, you could apply for both in the same assessment. In order to gain online access as a non-member, you can visit the website and you can gain online access. As mentioned previously, we would recommend discussing the decision on which membership or registration you want to apply for with your manager, mentor, and employer. Some roles may require CPEng registration, while others may never need this. The reassessment element of CPEng registration is important in showing that you are currently competent. However, if this is not required for your role, it can be a frustrating and unnecessary process to put yourself through at least once every 6 years. As discussed earlier, being eligible to apply for Chartered Member requires you to either be a member or an emerging professional. Part of the submission process requires you to commit to the Code of Ethical Conduct and also to commit to lifelong learning of a minimum of 40 hours per year of CPD. This can also be gained automatically through mutual recognition with no assessment necessary if you hold overseas registration through a recognised authority such as CEng UK, CPEng Australia, PE in the USA, etc. By gaining membership with Engineering New Zealand, you can be part of our community and enjoy the benefits of membership. It allows you to be part of the voice of the profession and access resources and industry news in your area of practice or to the overall engineering industry. Holding membership with Engineering New Zealand allows you to become more marketable, both outside and within your organisation, as this provides credibility and a quality mark of professionalism, and this shows that you have committed to a code of ethics. You are able to access discounted learning and development, both through courses and workshops, but also online learning such as webinars. The biggest benefit most people mention is the ability to connect with other engineers through our branches and young engineer groups. These events can be used not only for learning, but helping to network. One of the performance criteria for the maintaining currency aspect of the assessment is that you demonstrate collaborative involvement with engineers in the class that you're applying for, and this is a great opportunity to meet other people going through the process or people that are already on a register or are chartered members. You also are required to provide 2 referees as part of the assessment, and they do need to be either on the register or membership that you're applying for or equivalent. If you work for a large organisation, this might not be an issue finding these. However, if you're struggling, then you are able to potentially meet these people at these events. As discussed earlier, being eligible to apply for CPEng registration does require you to hold Washington Accord or equivalent knowledge. However, there's no requirement to be a member of Engineering New Zealand. Part of the submission process requires you to commit to the Code of Ethical Conduct, and at the end of the process, you'll be given a term of either 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years until your next reassessment. The reassessment process is much less work than the initial assessment and only requires you to provide 2 samples since your last assessment that demonstrate how you are showing evidence of staying competent, that you're still doing complex work, and that you have kept up to date with the technological, regulatory, and good practice changes in your area since your last assessment. For first-time applicants, a 4-year term is considered to be the normal term and the most likely following your assessment. A 6-year term is for applicants who have demonstrated that they are significantly above the standard. A 2-year term is for people that have been able to provide evidence of complex engineering work samples. However, the most common reason for a 2-year term is that your CPD is not at the level expected of a professional engineer. The assessors are looking for a minimum of 40 hours per year for the last 6 years, and if you've only provided 20 hours per year, for example, this is not enough to be declined. However, they will want to see you in 2 years' time instead of 4 years to make sure that you've improved in this area. It is important to note that a 2-year term does not mean that you're not competent or that you barely scraped over the standard. The first step in this process is for the assessors to establish that you do meet the standard of a reasonable professional engineer, and once the answer to this is yes, then a term is given. If gone through the mutual recognition, there is still an assessment necessary. However, this only requires evidence of one of the 4 groups. If you're wanting to apply for the professional class, but you do not hold Washington Accord qualification, you'll be required to first undertake a knowledge assessment. This assessment is to show that you've bridged the gaps between your qualifications and a Washington Accord. This can be through further learning, for example postgrad study, or on-the-job training, or a combination of both. Made up of 8 elements. The hardest part of providing guidance on the knowledge assessment is that everybody is different in regards to how many gaps are required to be bridged. If you hold a Sydney Accord qualification, you will have less gaps required to be bridged than a Dublin Accord, for example. This presentation doesn't go into a huge amount of detail into the knowledge assessment. However, it is important to note the following couple of points. Element 2, mathematical knowledge, is the most difficult to bridge purely through on-the-job training. If you do hold a Dublin Accord and you're attempting to apply through purely on-the-job training, this will be unlikely able to be bridged without some level of further study. An NZQA level 6 in mathematics is critical for all fields of engineering in the KA. You need to provide evidence that shows you have met the NZQA level 8 standard for at least one area of practice. Every discipline will be assessed differently against these areas, meaning that not every area is as important. An applicant can get a 0 NZQA level in some of these areas and still be able to pass if it is not required for their discipline. Our knowledge assessors strongly recommend that for elements 5 to 8 of the knowledge assessment, that you need to provide evidence of first principles and calculations. They've requested that applicants for these elements provide a design example and an analysis example.
This is our assessment process wheel. Most applicants will need 4 to 6 years of experience to be ready to apply for the professional class, or 5 to 7 years for PNGL. However, as this is an evidence-based assessment, when you believe that you have 4 to 6 work samples that show evidence of complex engineering, you are able to apply. It is possible for someone who has worked in a role where they were exposed to incredibly complex work from year 1 that they may still be able to apply in 2 to 3 years. However, there is also a chance that when someone is working in a role where they are not exposed to any complex work, they may not be ready for 10 plus years. As the preparation stage can take some time, we highly recommend adding every work and learning record that you complete throughout your career. This makes it easier when compiling the application and choosing which evidence you want to use, as it will already be uploaded to the system. Feel free to use it as a storage space in case you change jobs or lose the files. We highly recommend that you have a manager, mentor, or someone who is already on the register review your submission prior to submitting. If you have any practice area assessors working for your organisation, these would be even better. We can often tell within a matter of minutes from looking at an application whether it has been reviewed or not, as it is incredibly important for applicants to understand how their work is complex and also what a good amount of information to put in would be. We find that often first-time applicants provide far too much information, but we really do want to stress that our practice area assessors are volunteers, so we really want applicants to stick to the 4 to 6 samples, as the assessors will request more if required. All sections of the assessment do need to be 100% complete, including both referee responses, before an applicant can submit their assessment to us. Stage 2 is validation, and this takes around 1 to 2 weeks. This is a high-level review from the Engineering New Zealand Competence Assessment Advisors, where we will advise if anything is missing, maybe you have too much information, maybe your referees aren't eligible, etc. Some of the common issues we run into is applicants not specifically referencing the complexity definitions, or making up their own, or not referencing where in the work samples the assessors should be looking. As an example, page numbers rather than directing them to a 400-page document. Not having learning records for the last 6 years, and practice area descriptions being only a 15 to 25 word statement of knowledge and skills rather than a scope of practice or a marketing tool, which it is not. The third stage in the process is evaluation, and this takes 8 to 10 weeks. At this stage, we'll assign you an assessment panel. The panel will consist of generally 2 people, a lead assessor who is on the register or membership that you're applying for, but may not be in your field, and they will be the manager of the process, and also a practice area assessor who will be the technical expert in your field or area. Please note that the PAA is a volunteer, so we do try to take the time and date of the interactive assessment work for them as best as possible. This is also why it's important not to overload them with information and make it clear how your evidence is showing that you are competent and showing complexity, but also where to look. The interactive assessment is usually done via video conference and is what we call a professional conversation, where the assessors will ask you to discuss your evidence and will address any gaps they may have found. This is not by any means an interrogation or a grilling, but a roundtable discussion, and where the assessors often use it for their own CPD to keep up to date and learn more about your projects and evidence. Stage 4 is recommendation, and this is around 1 to 2 weeks. This is where the panel will make a recommendation of either approve or decline for membership, and if applying for CPEng, it will be approve or decline and a term to next assessment. Stage 5 is decision, and this is around 1 week. This is where our Competence Assessment Board meet, and they do this on the second Thursday of every month, and they will choose to accept the recommendation, or they may refer this back to the panel to provide further evidence for the report, if this is required. Please note that during Stage 3, which is evaluation, we are experiencing high volumes in this area at the moment, and so if you're in the structural field, it will take longer around this time to find an appropriate assessment panel. When you have access to the online area, this is the page that you will see when you log in. As you can see, this shows you a summary of your current year's CPD hours as you complete these throughout your year to meet the minimum of 40 hours. This also shows you your current membership status with Engineering New Zealand and allows you to choose your goal and show you the next steps in the process to achieve this. Up on the top left of the screen, which unfortunately is not shown on the screen, there is a menu button which will open up other areas of the online area for you to explore and to complete your assessment. Under the main menu, there is one area that is important for you to take note of as part of the assessment process, and this is the Career tab. In this area, you will review your credentials or add new ones, create your CPD records, your work records, which will be used to show evidence of how you meet the standard, and to open and complete your assessment. The first thing to note is that you need to complete work records first prior to being able to add them to your assessment for evidence. Work records are evidence of your projects that you have undertaken during your career. If you're looking to apply in the future, we recommend that you add every project that you complete, as this will make it easier having them all on the system in the future. However, if you are looking to apply in the next few months, we would recommend just adding the 4 to 6 that you want to use. For each work record that you want to use as evidence, you'll need to provide evidence files. These can be designs, calculations, drawings, reports, emails, or anything that you consider shows evidence of your competence. As this is an evidence-based assessment, you are unable to use any work records in your assessment that don't have at least one work file. When creating these records, you just need to provide an overall description of the project and your role or responsibilities. There's no need to discuss how it shows evidence of complexity or the competence groups, as you will do this as part of your assessment evidence. When writing these descriptions, it is important to write about I, not we, as the assessors are not interested in what the team did, they just want to know what your role was. For the competence assessment, you need to provide evidence of your last 6 years of CPD or learning records, and they are looking for a minimum of 40 hours per year. Learning records are much broader than most people realize, and really you are likely doing 500 hours per year or more. On this slide, you will see evidence of types of learning. However, you can also use mentoring or being mentored, site visits, educational YouTube videos, or anything else that has helped you maintain your currency or keep you up to date with the profession. This presentation you are watching right now is 1 hour you can use as CPD. It is more important to make sure you have an array of types of learning rather than a large number. For instance, the assessors will hold more weight to an applicant that has 4 to 5 types of records per year than someone who has 500 hours of only private reading each year. You are not required to upload files as evidence for learning records. You are welcome to upload a spreadsheet if this is easier, if you have an offline template that you have used with your company or overseas organization. It is also important to note that you are allowed to have gaps in your CPD. For instance, it is common for people to have taken years off for things like parental leave or an overseas experience. This will not affect your assessment as long as you add a learning record to address why there is a gap and that you have showed you have kept up to date in other years. A good tip is to create a calendar reminder on the last Friday of the week or month to record your CPD for that time period. You might dismiss it 3 weeks in a row, but there might be 1 week where you did attend a course or went on a site visit, which would be great to add as a professional development. To view your competence or knowledge assessment, you will need to go into the Assessments area within the Career tab. For a reassessment, this is also where you will find this. Unlike the previous website, you are unable to open these on your own behalf to ensure that the correct assessment is open for you. However, this will be opened following a credential check or your request for an assessment through the website. This will show a list of all open assessments and show you a progress bar for each. Please note that this will automatically start above 0% as the personal details section will likely be completed as part of becoming a member or gaining online access. We highly recommend updating the personal details section of the assessment to add fields such as employer and role, which are newly introduced fields in the new website and that will help us with potential conflicts when finding you an appropriate assessment panel. As part of your portfolio of evidence, you need to provide 2 referees who are on the register or membership that you are applying for or equivalent. You can use overseas referees and they also do not have to be in your practice field. The assessors would prefer 1 referee from inside your company and 1 external referee if possible. You are able to use your manager, colleague, director, or anyone else that you consider to be the best at providing insight into your competence. The only conflict of interest we have is around family members. We have 21 practice fields and you will need to select 1 to 2 of these. In the competence assessment, you are not assessed in your practice field, but rather your practice area. This description is a 15 to 25 word description which provides an overview of the knowledge and skills you are providing evidence of as part of this assessment. This is not a marketing tool or a scope of practice, but an overview of your evidence, and this is also how we find an assessment panel based on these keywords. For instance, the example on screen would not stop the applicant from working outside of this area, as an example on retaining walls. The only thing stopping them is the code of ethics and their commitment to working in the area of competence. You do need to make sure that you have evidence of everything that you are including in your practice area. The majority of these are changed by the assessment panel to better match your evidence. This is not public information, as when you are searched on the register, the only thing that will show is the practice field or fields. As part of our membership pathway change on 1 October 2017, we also changed our assessment process and how the evidence was needed to be compiled. We previously had 12 elements that applicants were required to provide 2 work samples for each. We received feedback that there was a lot of crossover between some of these elements, so we've merged them into 4 competency groups. They are engineering knowledge, managing engineering work, professional acumen, and developing technical solutions. These 12 elements still make up our competence standard according to the CPEng rules and regulations. However, the formatting into groups has made it easier for both applicants and assessors. For each of the 4 groups, you will be required to provide a statement of approximately 500 words where you provide an overall general statement of how you are meeting the standard for each group. You are not required to provide any reference to your work records until the 5th section, where you add your work records and discuss which of the groups it relates to. Group 1 is engineering knowledge, and if you are applying for mutual recognition, this is the only group that will be required to be completed. Element 2 is New Zealand specific knowledge for CPEng only, and for all other assessments, this changes to local knowledge. Group 2 is the group where you add your work records if you're attempting to show evidence of managing engineering work. You also need to show evidence of complex activities. With judgment, it is important to note that the whole portfolio of evidence is looked at as evidence of professional judgment. The assessors will be wanting you to provide a submission that is well put together and clearly defined as to how you are meeting the standard and where they should look. Group 3, professional acumen. Evidence for ethics can be discussing why you didn't just go for the cheapest option and instead went for something more expensive but safer. You also could discuss the actions you'd take to avoid ethical situations around confidentiality, for example. For social, cultural, environmental, this could be around making sure you are being aware of all stakeholders, whether this be local iwi, neighbours, regarding noise, etc. For communication, this can be shown via evidence of email chains between yourself and clients or contractors. Communication will be assessed as part of your interactive assessment and submission as a whole. Group 4, developing technical solutions. This is the group where you add your work records if you're attempting to show evidence of developing technical solutions. You need to show evidence of complex problems. A common question we get is around design. If you are not doing design work, you are still able to apply as long as you can show evidence of developing solutions. Unless you have the word design in your practice area, you are not required to provide this as part of the assessment as long as you are developing solutions. This is where you attach your 4 to 6 work records that you would like to use as evidence for your competence assessment. When you link one of your existing records that you created in the work records area, you will need to provide a statement that details which of the groups this relates to. This could be one group or 4 groups or anywhere in between. If showing evidence of groups 2 or 4, you will need to provide evidence of complex problems and activities and those definitions according to our guidance document. It is very important to make it clear where the assessors should be looking in the files to find the evidence by using page numbers or sections. To help with the large number of first-time applicants applying for chartership, we have introduced assessment rounds for 2021. For more information on the key dates around deadlines and timeframes, please see the attached link. Due to the high number of applications coming through and because we rely on volunteer practice area assessors, we are only able to accept a limited number of assessments per round, and if this is full, then you will be moved to the next round in the schedule. Unfortunately, there is currently a backlog in structural applications due to the lack of available assessors in this area. So while the dates on the link provided are worth noting, there is only a limited number of assessments that we can take per round in this area based on the available assessors. Some tips for success in regards to the competence assessment. When writing up your submission, remember to talk about yourself using I, me, or my. The assessors don't want to know what the team did as part of the project, they only are interested in your own involvement and work. We recommend 500 words approximately for the first 4 groups. This only needs to be a general statement as you go into proper detail regarding your work records in the 5th work items section. Common feedback is that people really struggle to find their evidence they did 4, 5, or 6 years ago. particularly in regards to learning records. You do need to provide your last 6 years of learning records, and while it may seem frustrating at the time, it is worth spending an extra couple of hours doing a good job for each of the last 6 years rather than providing a detailed response for just the last couple, as this can be the difference between a 2-year term and a 4-year term. It is vital that you specifically reference the complexity definitions from our guidance document. The assessors will look for evidence of you discussing complexity, and if they don't find it, they will likely send it back to you to revise. The competence assessment is not a yes or no portfolio based solely on your portfolio of evidence you provide. We very commonly see first-time applicants provide huge submissions where they attempt to provide 10 to 15 work samples. The assessors will always come back to you if they find any gaps in your evidence and will give you the opportunity to provide further evidence. Please try to stick to the 4 to 6 requested. With your learning records, make sure that you address any gaps that will make the assessors question. It is not a problem to have gaps for things such as parental leave, OE, etc. All the assessors require is a record created discussing why there is a gap. Make sure that you discuss and go over your application with a manager or mentor along the way to help you understand whether your evidence is complex and whether you have provided a professional portfolio. Feel free to contact us along the way, and we are happy to give you guidance that you are on the right track. We can validate your application along the way, so once you have added a couple of work records to your application and filled in a couple of the groups, feel free to get in touch and we can give you feedback just to make sure that you're on the right track. It is all about quality over quantity. As mentioned earlier, we only want you to provide 4 to 6 work records, and the assessors will always ask for more if required. Our assessors have often stated that if you need 10 plus work samples to show that you have met the standard, this likely means that you aren't quite ready to apply yet. You should all be showing evidence of multiple groups and complexity in the majority of the projects that you're working on. With your evidence files, if it is a large document, but only 10 of the 500 pages are relevant, feel free to just upload these files. The assessors can ask for the rest if they require it. Keep in mind at all times that the practice area assessor is a volunteer, particularly around making it clear where to look, but also regarding being flexible on times for the interactive assessment. And just a couple of quick points on confidentiality. Our assessors do sign a contract regarding confidentiality that all of the evidence will not be discussed outside of Engineering New Zealand and the assessment panel. You do have the option of declining your assessment panel if you believe that there is a conflict of interest. You are able to censor your work records through black lines or something similar, through company names, figures, or anything else that you consider confidential. However, it is important that you do not lose the context of the evidence so that the assessors can still access this. And that brings us to the end of our Let's Get You Chartered presentation. Q&A sessions are able to be scheduled with Engineering New Zealand following your viewing of this presentation. For more information on booking one of these, please contact the email on screen. If you have specific questions regarding your own assessment, please email us at the address on screen. For a Q&A session, we would appreciate only holding these for groups of a minimum of 10 people and with all attendees having watched this presentation. These will likely be 10 to 15 minutes long, so get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks for your time, and we hope this helped. Best of luck putting your application together.